There was a smell that hit you the moment her front door opened. A combination of hair grease, something slow cooking on the stove, pine sol on the floors, and something else you could never quite name, but would recognize instantly 50 years later. Your whole body relaxed the second you smelled it, because it meant you were safe, you were loved, and somebody in that house was about to feed you whether you were hungry or not. That smell was Grandma's house. And if you were a black kid growing up in the 1970s, nothing in this world has ever come close to replacing it. Hi, my name is James, and this is Soulful Nostalgia, where we dig deep into the memories, the traditions, and the everyday magic that shaped Black life in America. If this is your first time here, welcome home. Now let's get into it. 1. The plastic-covered furniture you were not allowed to sit on comfortably. The living room furniture in Grandma's house was not for living, it was for looking at. Every sofa, every armchair, every love seat was encased in thick plastic slipcovers that had been on there so long they had become part of the furniture itself. You sat down and the plastic crinkled loud enough to wake the neighbors. In summer, your legs stuck to it the moment bare skin made contact, and when you stood up it sounded like you were tearing something important, and Lord forbid you tried to get comfortable and shift around. Grandma heard every single movement from 3 rooms away. Kids learned quickly that the living room was a formal space, a museum of sorts, preserved for company and for adults who knew how to behave. The real sitting happened in the kitchen. The living room was just something you admired from a respectful distance, the same way you admired everything else in that house. 2. The guest bathroom nobody was allowed to use. Grandma often had 2 bathrooms, or at least 1 bathroom with a very clear distinction between acceptable use and sacred territory. The good towels hanging in there were decorative. They matched the little rug on the floor, and the cover on the toilet tank, and the cover on the spare toilet paper roll. Because, yes, even the spare toilet paper had a cover. Usually a crocheted doll with a wide skirt hiding it underneath. You did not use those towels. You did not even brush those towels with your fingertips. If you used the bathroom, you dried your hands on the back of your pants like a sensible child and moved on. Some grandmothers had decorative soaps shaped like seashells or roses sitting in a little dish that had never touched water in their lives. You knew better than to touch those either. The guest bathroom was a display. Your job was simply to appreciate it from the doorway and keep walking. 3. The candy dish that had been sitting there since 1962. Every grandmother had one, a glass candy dish with a lid, sitting on the coffee table or the end table in the living room. Inside that dish lived an assortment of hard candies that existed outside of the time. Butterscotch discs, peppermints, those strawberry-shaped candies with the soft center wrapped in strawberry-printed cellophane, and something else nobody had ever seen for sale anywhere, and nobody could identify with confidence. The candy in Grandma's dish had potentially been in there since the Eisenhower administration. But here is the thing. You still ate it because it was Grandma's candy dish, and refusing it was not an option. She would offer you a piece with a smile, you would say thank you, and you would eat it. And somehow, it was still good. That candy dish held mysteries that science has not yet explained. 4. The specific smell of her house that you still cannot fully describe. People spend real money trying to recreate that scent, and they never get it right. It was not one thing. It was everything combined into something that existed nowhere else on Earth. The hair grease warming on the bathroom shelf. The pine sol she used to mop those hardwood floors every single Friday without exception. The mothballs tucked into closets and dresser drawers. The slow-rolling steam from whatever had been on the stove since before you woke up. The particular scent of old wood and older fabric, and something faintly floral from a powder she kept on her dresser. Old Spice coming from the bathroom if your grandfather was still living there. Dried flowers, church programs, decades of Sunday dinners, soaked into the walls. You could be anywhere in the world, catch one piece of that combination, and suddenly be 6 years old again, standing in her doorway with your overnight bag. That smell was not a smell, it was a feeling. 5. Sleeping under 17 blankets no matter the season. Grandma did not believe in being cold. She also did not particularly believe that you knew when you were cold, because clearly you did not, which is why she was stacking blankets on you like she was preserving something for the winter. You could arrive in July with the temperature sitting at 90 degrees outside and somehow still end up under a quilt, a chenille bedspread, and what appeared to be an additional emergency blanket just in case. The bed itself was an experience. It was high off the ground, requiring a small climb to get into. The mattress had history. The pillows were enormous and smelled like that specific grandma pillow smell that no candle company has ever successfully bottled. You sank into that bed like it was accepting you, and despite the 17 layers of coverage, despite the heat, you slept better in that bed than you have slept anywhere before or since. Grandma's bed had healing properties that modern medicine has never studied and probably should. 6. The Bible on Grandma's coffee table was not just a Bible. It was the family's official record of everything that had ever happened. Births were written in the front pages in careful handwriting, going back generations. Death dates were recorded. Marriage dates were recorded. Names of babies who did not make it were listed. Photographs were tucked between pages. Faces of relatives you had never met, staring back at you from images, faded to brown and white. Prayer cards from funerals. Dried flowers, pressed flat between the Psalms. That Bible held the entire history of your family in its pages and margins. Grandma knew exactly where every entry was. She could open to the right page without looking. Children learned early to handle that Bible with clean hands and serious respect, because it was not just religious text. It was evidence that your family had existed, had endured, and had kept records of every soul that passed through. That Bible was the original family database. 7. Being fed the moment you walked through the door. You had not finished saying hello before the plate was being fixed. It did not matter that your parents had fed you an hour before arrival. It did not matter that you announced you were not hungry. Grandma had been cooking since before you left your house, and the idea that you would walk through her door and not eat was something she was not prepared to entertain as a concept. You sat down at that kitchen table and something appeared in front of you. Cornbread, a bowl of something, a piece of whatever had been in that pot all morning, and it was never small. Grandma's portions operated on a completely different scale than the rest of the world. She measured love in food, and she loved you very, very much. Saying you were full only triggered a second round of offerings. The correct response to everything Grandma put in front of you was, "Thank you," and a fork. That was the only acceptable response. 8. The switch she kept, and you knew better than to make her cut another one. There was a switch somewhere in that house, and every child who visited knew exactly where it was without being told. You just knew. It lived in a specific corner or hung from a specific hook, and its presence was a constant reminder of the behavioral standards Grandma maintained in her home. Now Grandma rarely had to use it because the threat alone did considerable work. You corrected your behavior at the mere thought of that switch being retrieved. And the absolute worst version of events was being sent outside to cut your own switch from the bush in the yard, because that meant you had pushed things to a level that required a custom tool. Every black kid who grew up in the 1970s understood the mathematics of Grandma's discipline. The switch represented a standard of conduct, And that standard made you behave in ways that followed you out of her house and into the rest of your life. 9. Her stories that started with the words, "back in my day," and lasted 45 minutes. You asked one innocent question. Maybe you asked why she did something a certain way. Maybe you made an offhand comment about something you saw on television, and that was all it took. She settled back in her chair, her hands folded or busy with something she was sewing, and she began. Back in my day. Those 4 words were both a beginning and a commitment. You were not going anywhere for a while. Her stories wound through places and people and times you had never seen, picking up relatives and neighbors along the way, circling back through decades before eventually arriving at a point that was always wiser than anything you could have anticipated. Children who tried to rush these stories or look bored paid a social price. The ones who listened, really listened, came away with something they would spend the rest of their lives slowly understanding. Grandma's stories were education disguised as conversation. 10. The specific television programs she watched and would not negotiate about. Grandma's television watched her programs. Not your programs, her programs. The stories, which she called soap operas, ran in the afternoon, and the entire household organized itself around that schedule. You did not talk during the stories. You did not walk in front of the television during the stories. You relocated yourself to another part of the house and found something quiet to do until they were over. In the evenings came her news programs and whatever variety shows she preferred. Lawrence Welk was a frequent feature in some grandmothers' houses, which was a specific kind of sacrifice for Black children who had been hoping for something else entirely. I will not say I fell asleep during Lawrence Welk, but I will say I have very little memory of how any of those episodes ended. You watched what Grandma watched in Grandma's house. That was simply the rule, and somehow you survived it. 11. The photographs on the wall covered every inch of available space. Grandma's walls were a gallery. School portraits going back decades lined the hallways in matching frames or whatever frames had been available at the time. Graduation photos, wedding portraits, military pictures of uncles in uniform, looking serious and proud. Baby pictures of people who were now older than your parents. Professional photographs mixed with snapshots, mixed with pictures cut from newspapers when someone in the family had been mentioned. The wall told the story of every branch of the family simultaneously, and Grandma knew every single face. She could walk you down that hallway and identify every person, their relation to you, what they were doing now, and probably something they had done that was either impressive or worth a cautionary tale. Children who stood before those walls long enough started to see their own faces reflected back from generations past. Those photographs were identity. Standing under them meant you belonged to something larger than yourself. 12. Getting your hair greased and pressed whether you wanted it or not. You sat down in that kitchen chair and Grandma was behind you with the comb and the grease before you fully processed what was happening. It did not matter that your hair had been done recently. It did not matter that you were not going anywhere that required presentation. Grandma had standards about how her grandchildren looked, and those standards were non-negotiable regardless of your personal opinion on the matter. The hot comb came off the stove, and you sat very, very still. You had been taught to sit still for this process at an age when you could barely sit still for anything. The smell of warm grease and pressed hair filled the kitchen, and when she was finished, she stood back and looked at you with satisfaction, the way an artist looks at a completed work. Then she sent you outside to play, in the heat, within 20 minutes of what she had just spent 45 minutes doing, but you looked good getting there. 13. The Jet and Ebony magazine collection stacked higher than your head. Grandma kept every issue, not just recent ones. Every issue going back years was stacked in specific locations throughout the house, with a precision that looked like a casual arrangement, but was actually an organizational system only she fully understood. Jet magazines on the end table, ebony magazines in a rack near the good chair, additional stacks in the bedroom. The beauty of the week in Jet. The covers of Ebony featuring every black celebrity and public figure of significance. These magazines were windows into a world that reflected black people with dignity and celebration, and Grandma treated them accordingly. Children spent hours turning pages, absorbing images of black excellence in every field. Those magazines taught you something about who you were and who you could become before anyone used that kind of language. Grandma was curating your education and your identity with every issue she kept. She just called it reading material. 14. Being sent outside and told not to come back until the street lights came on. After breakfast was eaten and the kitchen was cleaned, and Grandma had things to attend to, children were pointed toward the door with clear instructions. Go outside. Play. Do not come back until the streetlights come on, and do not make her come looking for you. Outside, you went into a world that belonged entirely to children from that moment until dusk. The neighborhood around Grandma's house was its own geography that you mapped differently each visit. Other kids materialized from nearby houses. Games organized themselves from nothing. Somebody had a ball. Somebody else knew a game the others did not. Hours dissolved. Nobody checked on you because the neighborhood itself was watching. Every adult on that block knew whose grandchild you were and would report back or correct you directly if necessary. The streetlights coming on was not a suggestion. It was a hard deadline that every child respected because the alternative was not worth considering. 15. Her cast iron skillet was older than everyone in the room. That cast iron skillet, living on Grandma's stove, had been seasoned over so many decades, and it had developed a surface that modern cookware engineers cannot replicate in a laboratory. It was black as midnight and heavy as consequence, and it had cooked more meals than anyone could count. Grandma did not wash that skillet with soap. You did not wash that skillet with soap. If you washed it with soap, you had created a problem that would be discussed for longer than you wanted it to be discussed. You wiped it out, dried it on the burner, and put it back where it lived. That skillet fried chicken that has never been equaled by any restaurant at any price. It made cornbread that came out with a crust on the bottom that was its own separate achievement. Cast iron skillets get passed down in black families like heirlooms because they are heirlooms. That skillet had a history, and it showed in every single thing that came out of it. 16. The specific Sunday morning church preparation ritual. Saturday night at Grandma's house was not casual. It was preparation. Clothes were laid out. Shoes were polished to a standard that shoes are rarely polished to anymore. Baths were taken with the seriousness of a medical procedure. Sunday morning itself began earlier than you believed mornings were permitted to begin, with gospel music already coming from somewhere in the house and the smell of breakfast already moving through every room. Getting dressed happened in a specific order, and Grandma inspected every element of your appearance before anyone walked out that door. Your collar, your shoes again. Whether your slip was showing, whether your tie was straight, whether you had used enough of the right amount of lotion, because ashy skin in the house of the Lord was not something Grandma was going to be responsible for. You went to church looking like the best possible version of yourself because that was what Grandma required. And sitting in that pew beside her, you understood exactly why. 17. The jars of mystery food lining every shelf in the pantry. Grandma's pantry was a wall of mason jars reaching from the floor to the ceiling, and every single jar contained something she had put up herself. Green beans, tomatoes, peaches, beets. Things that were a purple that you could not immediately identify. Things that were orange. There was a jar you decided not to ask about, because sometimes the best strategy at Grandma's house was to simply trust the process. She had canned and preserved through the summer and fall so that winter would not catch the family without. Children who peeked into that pantry were looking at months of work and planning and self-sufficiency that the modern grocery store has made invisible. When Grandma opened a jar of her own tomatoes and cooked them into something on that stove, you understood on a level below words that what you were eating was different from anything in a can from the store. That pantry was independence. It was preparation. It was the knowledge that whatever came, the family would eat. 18. Being put to work the moment you arrived. You did not come to Grandma's house for a vacation. You came to Grandma's house and she put you to work. There was always something that needed doing, and extra hands were a resource she was not going to waste out of sentimentality. Sweeping the porch, snapping beans at the kitchen table, going to the store for something she needed, helping hang laundry on the line out back, drying dishes while she washed them, and talking to you about things she wanted you to know. The work was never punitive, it was instructional. You were learning how a household ran, how to contribute to something larger than yourself, and how to do things with your hands that would serve you for the rest of your life. Grandma understood that idle children developed habits she did not approve of. Work was love in her house, the same as food was love, and stories were love, and correction was love. Everything she did was aimed at sending you back into the world better than you arrived. 19. The prayer before every single meal. No exceptions. Nobody touched their fork. Nobody even looked at their fork until the prayer was finished. It did not matter how hungry you were, or how good the food smelled, or how long you had been waiting for it to be ready. You bowed your head, you closed your eyes, and you waited. Grandma's prayers were not brief. Administrative prayers designed to get through the formality and reach the food. They were genuine, extended conversations with God that covered gratitude for the meal, gratitude for the family gathered, specific mentions of family members who were not present and needed looking after, prayers for the community, prayers for the nation, and a few other items that came to mind in the moment. As a hungry child, you learned patience during these prayers that no other experience in your life could have taught you. And here is the truth that only comes with age. Those prayers felt like presents. They covered that table with something that the food alone could not provide. You understood that later, long after you left her house, Asantas, for the last time. 20. Her medicine cabinet full of remedies that had no labels. Grandma's medicine cabinet was a different system of medicine entirely. There was Vicks Vapor Rub, of course, because Vicks was non-negotiable in any black grandmother's house from 1950 through at least 1995. There was castor oil in a brown bottle that children identified by sight and avoided at all costs. There were small jars and bottles with handwritten labels, or no labels at all, containing things she had made herself. Remedies passed down from her mother and her mother before her, that no pharmacy stocked and no doctor had prescribed. When you were sick at Grandma's house, you were not taken to urgent care. You were treated with methods that predated urgent care by a considerable number of generations. And the strange thing was that you got better. You always got better. Whether it was the remedies themselves, or her hands on your forehead, or the fact that she sat beside you through the night and refused to leave, something in that house healed you every single time. 21. The quilts she made by hand told family stories. Grandma's quilts were not decorative. They were documentation. Every quilt she made had a history sewn into it. Pieces of fabric cut from clothes that her children had worn as children, from dresses that had worn out beyond further mending, from shirts of men who were no longer living. She could hold up any section of any quilt and tell you what that fabric had been before it became part of the pattern. This was from your uncle's school shirt in 1957. This was from the dress I wore the day your mother was born. This came from your great-grandmother's apron. The quilt on Grandma's bed was a family tree made of cloth and needle and thread. Late nights of careful work after everyone else was asleep. Children who grew up sleeping under those quilts were sleeping under their own history without fully understanding it. Some of those quilts are still in families today, still being used, still carrying all that warmth and all that memory into rooms their maker never saw. 22. Everything important happened on Grandma's back porch. The front porch was for greeting people properly. The back porch was where life actually occurred. Lawn chairs arranged in a configuration that had probably not changed in 15 years. A metal glider that creaked in a rhythm you can still hear if you close your eyes. Maybe a table with a fan on it in the summer. Neighbors came and went without knocking because this was understood territory. Women sat out here and shelled peas and talked about everything happening in the neighborhood. Men came by in the evenings. Children ran in and out. Information was exchanged. Problems were discussed. Prayers were requested. And news traveled from porch to porch across the block faster than any technology has managed since. That back porch was the original social network, running on community and trust, and the shared understanding that everyone on that block was connected. If Grandma's porch could talk, it would have more to say than most books you have ever read. 23. Being corrected by every adult in the house simultaneously. You made one mistake. Maybe you spoke out of turn. Maybe you forgot to say yes, ma'am. Maybe you ran through the house or reached across the table for something instead of asking. It did not matter which adult witnessed it, because whatever adult witnessed it corrected you immediately, without hesitation, without checking whether your parents approved, and without any concern for your feelings on the matter. And if your parents were present, they did not intervene in your defense. They agreed with the correcting adult and often added to it. This was not considered overreach in the 1970s. This was considered a community raising a child the way a child was supposed to be raised. Every aunt, every uncle, every family friend who had been around long enough was authorized and expected to correct children who were out of order. You behaved in Grandma's house, not because one person was watching, but because everyone was watching. And every single one of them had both the authority and the intention to say something about it. 24. The specific bedtime routine that allowed zero negotiation. Grandma set a bedtime, and that bedtime was a fact of nature, not a suggestion. The sun went down, the hour arrived, and children went to bed. There was no negotiating for another 30 minutes. There was no one more episode of anything. You could not say you were not tired because Grandma did not require you to be tired in order to go to bed. You went to bed at the time she set because that was when children went to bed, and your personal energy level was not a factor she was considering. The routine was fixed. Bath. Prayers that you said yourself beside the bed on your knees. A specific way the covers were tucked that felt like being held. Sometimes she sat on the edge of the bed and talked to you quietly in the dark about whatever she wanted you to be thinking about as you fell asleep. Those conversations in the dark at Grandma's house planted things in you that are still growing. You understand that more every year. 25. Leaving with more than you came with. You never left Grandma's house the same way you arrived. She sent you home with food packed carefully in containers she wanted back, but knew she might not see again. A little money was pressed into your hand at the last moment, folded small, with the instruction not to spend it on foolishness. Sometimes a letter was tucked into your bag, that you found later, written in her handwriting, saying things she found easier to put on paper than to say out loud. You left with food and money and words, and something harder to name. A fullness that had nothing to do with the meals she fed you. You left knowing that somebody in this world knew exactly who you were, where you came from, and what you were capable of. That knowledge was the most important thing she ever sent home with you, and it has never run out. Grandma's house was not just a place. It was an education, a sanctuary, and something that built you from the inside out. If you were lucky enough to have a grandmother like this, leave a comment, press like, and subscribe to Soulful Nostalgia. You already know somebody needs to see this.